G'day, Professor Joseph Drew. We have a really big problem in Australian local government, and it's about building financially unsustainable discretionary assets. I'm not talking about roads and bridges and pipes and things that we need. I'm talking about the playgrounds, the astronomy centres, the theme parks and everything else that we're building. And I've got no issue with them. But if we're going to build these things, we need to make sure that they are financially and socially sustainable. We owe that to our community. In this video, I will go through the 4 steps that you must do if you want to build sustainable discretionary assets. This is a massive problem, and more I'm working with councils that got themselves in a real fiscal pickle because they've been building lots of discretionary infrastructure, increasing their cost base forever. It's not a temporary thing, it's a permanent increase to their cost base, and not testing the willingness to pay of the community or the social desirability of the asset, and then wondering why their community revolts when they go to them with a whopping great big tax increase of 30, 40, 50%. Okay, it's quite simple. If we're going to build discretionary assets, we need to follow 4 key steps that I will give you in a few seconds. But just to illustrate the point, lots of you know that I live in a rural area of about 60,000 people in my local government area, and this is an example of the sort of thing I'm talking about. New astronomy centre, excellent. Some people probably wanted it. There was a councillor on council that was in the astronomy group, so I'm sure that he wanted it. But 2-point-something million. Most of the money came from grants to construct it, but we've got maintenance costs and depreciation and ultimately asset replacement costs down the track. Very few people in the community where I live even know that this thing exists. No one I have talked to is prepared to pay for it because we don't do this in the area I live. We do rodeos and cows and drinking beer and things like that. So there's going to come a bit of a crisis when council finally comes to us and asks for the extra money to pay for this thing. If they'd followed through the 4 steps I'm about to go through with you, we wouldn't get in those sorts of difficult situations down the track. Step number 1, you need to be able to identify what is this good that we're meeting. Good as in a moral good. Why is this needed? If it's a want, why is it reasonable for some people to pay for the wants of another want? How did we survive up until this time without this want? What would happen if we didn't provide for this want? These things need to be clearly enunciated, and ideally in the public domain. People should be able to see why we are building this. What is the need that we're meeting? Why is it a good moral objective? Why should we all contribute? Because we will ultimately all have to pay for this asset. If you can't state those things clearly and succinctly, perhaps it's the case that we don't need the asset at all. Step number 2, we need to understand the whole of life cost. Now I see it all the time. Council's in trouble because they've taken grant money to build assets and they think it's free. It's not. Those costs will turn up in depreciation forevermore. There's often staffing costs associated with it. There's always maintenance costs, and ultimately the asset will have to be replaced. It's not a cute little puppy that we can get excited about. It's going to grow up into a great big old dog that's going to need lots of money and time and effort spent on it. So what is this whole of life cost? Work it out first. You can't possibly make a good decision, a financially sustainable decision, until you understand what this cost is. Step 3, where is this cost provided for in the long-term financial plan, in your 10-year budgeting? Point to the place where there's a surplus that can accommodate the ongoing costs of this new discretionary asset you're building. Step number 4, is there willingness to pay in the community? It's such a simple thing to test, and yet we're not testing it, which is why we're building lots of discretionary assets that people often don't want. There's only a small minority of people that want the thing, so there's not broad acceptance of the building. Lots of discretionary assets that people aren't willing to spend money to pay for. Now, as I said, it's a simple thing, and I've got other videos outlining this. You do a random survey, not listening to the squeaky wheels that tell up telling you that they're in the astronomy club and they'd like a $2-point-something million astronomy centre. Of course they would like that. That's not the question. They're not paying for it. It's the broader, the other 20,000 taxpayers in the local government area paying for it. So do a random sample of a couple hundred people. You've got property numbers, you can randomize by that. Often you've got email addresses and phone numbers, or at least postal addresses. Send out a survey. This is the proposal. This is the need it's meant to meet. This is the whole of life cost. This is what it will cost each taxpayer. Are you willing to pay for it or not? And test that willingness to pay. It's not a difficult thing to do. See, at the end of the day, no council will be ever in any financial sustainability difficulties if the community is willing to pay. But we don't test this, so we don't know. And then what happens is we run up deficits over many, many years, and all of a sudden we get to a crisis point and we go to a community and we hit them with a special rate variation of 30, 40, 50% and wonder why they're upset. They didn't know that these astronomy centres and playgrounds were going to cost them money. They weren't willing to pay for it. No one asked them. No one told them how much it would be. Of course they're going to be upset. We need to test every single time we're building major discretionary assets. We need to test this willingness to pay. It's a simple thing to do. I wish state governments across the country would legislate that it is mandatory for discretionary assets over a certain amount, maybe $1 million or $2 million. Such a simple 4-step process to have financially sustainable discretionary assets being built in our communities. I'd encourage you all to follow it. I encourage you to send this video around to other people, particularly your councillors, particularly your senior management, and of course to implement the proposal, because if we did, we would stop this descent into financial unsustainability that is plaguing so many of our councils right across Australia. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.